Good evening. Boris Johnson says he's very confident a new Brexit deal can be reached with the European Union. Speaking on his first visit to Scotland as Prime Minister, he said Theresa May's withdrawal agreement was dead, but there was scope for a new plan. However, Scotland's First Minister, Nicola Sturgeon, after holding talks with Mr Johnson, said she believed he was secretly pursuing a dangerous no-deal Brexit and warned it was now almost inevitable the UK will leave the EU without a deal. Here's our Scotland editor, Sarah Smith.
Visiting a Vanguard-class nuclear submarine on the Clyde, Boris Johnson wants the EU to know that he is ready to go to battle to try and get a brand new Brexit deal.
Good morning. Good morning. How are you?
He has ordered the turbocharging of no-deal preparations, but also seemed to contradict cabinet colleagues who've suggested no deal is the likely outcome. Michael Gove says the government's working assumption now has to be that there will be no deal with the EU. Is that your assumption?
No, absolutely not. My assumption is that we can get a new deal. We're aiming for a new deal. But of course, Michael is absolutely right that it's responsible for any government to prepare for a no deal. We should go for a deal, and there is every chance that we can get a deal. And I think with goodwill and with common sense, that is what we want to achieve.
So are the odds still 1,000,000 to 1 that we will leave with no deal?
Provided there is sufficient goodwill and common sense on the part of our partners, that is exactly where I would put the odds.
It may not sound like a warm welcome, but this visit to Scotland, coming to the First Minister's official residence just days after becoming Prime Minister, was designed to demonstrate his commitment to the United Kingdom. But Boris Johnson meeting Nicola Sturgeon face to face will not help them see eye to eye over Brexit. Not even close. A no-deal Brexit would be unconscionable, says the First Minister, and she was not convinced during this meeting that he can find an agreement.
This government and the path that it is pursuing, I think, is dangerous. It became clear to me that this government, the new Prime Minister, has set the UK on an almost inevitable path to a no-deal Brexit. The position that it has taken makes it very difficult to see how any deal can be struck with the EU, and I think that would be catastrophic for Scotland and indeed for the whole of the UK.
That is not good enough! The Scottish Tory leader clashed with Mr Johnson in the Brexit debates during the EU referendum 3 years ago, and they still don't agree on Europe. She says she will not support no deal, and told Mr Johnson that when they met today.
I said that I wanted to see the same level of energy and vigour that's going into no-deal planning, going into trying to get a deal. I wanted to see the sort of shuttle diplomacy that's going to be required if we're going to see changes that can be brought back to the House of Commons, and I received the assurances that I was looking for.
Mr Johnson does have some fans in Scotland.
Hi, Boris!
Yet he found himself slipping out the back door after his meeting with Ms Sturgeon. He wanted this visit to renew the ties that bind the United Kingdom. The SNP are confident he'll actually increase the appetite for Scottish independence. Sarah Smith, BBC News, Edinburgh.
The chief executive of the firm that owns the car maker Vauxhall says the company would shut its factory in Cheshire if Brexit makes the site unprofitable. The 1,000 workers at Ellesmere Port were told last month that if a Brexit deal was struck, the Astra model would continue production. But the French owners now say there are contingency plans to make the car elsewhere in Europe. Here's Coletta Smith.
Vauxhall, like much of the car industry, have been warning about the implications of a no-deal Brexit for some time. But today's comments are the hardest punch yet. Now the boss said they've a southern European plant in mind to build the next generation of Vauxhall Astra if Brexit makes building them here at Ellesmere Port unprofitable. The new Foreign Secretary says businesses have already been given help to prepare.
We're going to be stepping up that and reaching out to those sectors and businesses indeed that do feel vulnerable and will be more affected. Let's remember the car sector has been affected by a range of other issues, including the diesel situation and demand in China.
The industry is certainly under pressure. Honda's closing its Swindon site, Ford are to close their Bridgend plant, and Nissan are opting for more Japanese production lines.
Well, it is worrying time, but
John's been an employee here all his working life.
The lunacy of no Brexit is a problem. if there's no deal on tariffs, etc. But we stand ready as a union to ensure that we do everything we can to maintain volume car production at this plant.
But it'll be a tough fight. Car manufacturing's a competitive business. There's always a tussle for the next contract, and everyone who lives here on the Wirral knows just how important those jobs are.
The kids and that I feel for, because they're our next generation, and if there's nothing here for us, then what's here for them?
I think they're just going to use Brexit as an excuse to close it. It's already going to close. That seems to be the opinion of a lot of people around there.
You've got quite a few friends that are working in there at the moment.
Yeah, I've got a couple of friends working there. One's a paint sprayer and one works on the line.
Decisions taken a long way away will have a big impact here.
My news agents, they tell me that they make a lot of sales from people travelling into Vauxhalls in the morning on their shift. Obviously, lots of people directly employed there, lots of people are employed in supply chain and associated industries. And it really is a symbol of Ellesmere Port. Everyone associates Vauxhall Motors with Ellesmere Port.
Around 80% of the finished Astras are shipped from here across the sea to Europe. And that makes this Merseyside workforce more vulnerable than most. Coletta Smith, BBC News at Ellesmere Port.
Well, the government's tougher rhetoric over the possibility of a no-Brexit deal saw the pound falling to its lowest level against the dollar for more than 2 years. So what exactly is a no-deal withdrawal for the UK from the European Union, and are we prepared? Well, our business editor Simon Jack is here. No withdrawal agreement on October the 31st, Simon. What happens on November the 1st?
Well, that means if there's no agreement, that means there is no transition period. So overnight, the EU will be forced, it's important that, forced by international law to treat the UK as if it's like any other country with whom they don't have a deal. So they've got to treat us like the US, treat us like they would China. And that means a number of important things. The first is tariffs on goods that are made in the UK, sold in Europe. For example, lamb would see 40% added to the price. Most of that goes to the EU. Cars, most of those are exported to the EU that are made here, would have 10% added to them. And there's also going to be a lot of extra paperwork. We have 200 million customs declarations a year, which at the moment we don't have to fill in, that we will have to there. So what can the government do to prepare us for that cushion the blow? Well, it's already set aside £4.2 billion for Brexit preparations. We're expecting Sajid Javid, the new Chancellor, to put an extra £1 billion in that kitty because no deal's getting more likely. But a lot of this will fall to businesses. There's only so much governments can do. The government's not going to fill in your customs declaration for you. The big ones, the big companies have made preparations, much less the small ones. HMRC said most of them are not ready. Now, you mentioned the pound. The fact that we've gone from no deal being a 1 in a million chance, as Boris Johnson said a few weeks ago, to what Michael Gove over the weekend called the working assumption of the government has really hit the pound. It's now down. A pound will buy you $1.22. And if you look back a little bit in time, you can see that that's where we were before the referendum, nearly at $1.50. We came down here in that post period, went up a bit when we thought we were going to get a deal. And as you can see, in the last couple of days, it's really plummeted as this no deal talk has started. What else can the government do? Well, it can start spending big. It's made, Boris Johnson has talked about rail infrastructure, digital connections, and that will boost the economy, but that will take time. It will not take effect before October the 31st. So although there may be longer term benefits, we can do our own trade deals, etc., there will be some short-term disruption. Even though most people on the cabinet accept that, you can reduce that disruption by preparing for it, but you cannot remove it.
Okay, Simon, thank you. Simon Jack. Let's get more from our chief political correspondent, Vicky Young, who's at Westminster for us tonight. Vicky, Boris Johnson in Scotland making it clear that he believes that they can get a deal with the European Union. Nicola Sturgeon, one of those, not convinced.
No, that's right. I mean, the language has certainly changed. We've heard a lot more about turbocharging those preparations, these new committees, really upping the planning for all of that, and an expensive advertising campaign too. But remember, Boris Johnson has said, and has said it again today, his preference is to leave with a deal. Now, of course, the two things are related. For a long time, Brexiteers have felt that the way to get the best deal from the EU is to make sure that they believe that you will walk away from their talks, and they have never really felt that Theresa May did that. So where has it left us? It's really with a bit of a standoff. There are no plans, no meetings in the diary at the moment for Boris Johnson to go to Brussels. And today, Downing Street put it like this, saying the PM obviously wants to meet EU leaders and negotiate, but he doesn't want to sit down and be told that the EU cannot possibly reopen the agreement. So the big question is Boris Johnson willing to leave without a deal in just 94 days' time? Now, I don't think anyone really knows the answer to that, but it certainly can't be ruled out, and that could be the kind of uncertainty that they're hoping will really focus the minds of the negotiators in Brussels.
Vicky, thank you. Vicky Young there at Westminster.